You hear about the opioid crisis, and you think of these huge, staggering numbers and corporate greed. But to really get it, to truly understand it, we have to start small, with just one person. This is how a single prescription can spiral into a national epidemic. So, picture this. You run into your best friend from high school, someone you haven't seen in years. You remember them as this star athlete, just full of life. But the person standing in front of you now is a disheveled wreck. That's exactly how one person described seeing Shannon Bloom again, whose incredibly bright future was completely derailed by 4 years of drug abuse. I mean, look at this. How does someone go from being an all-state soccer player with a nearly perfect GPA to heroin addiction and a sidewalk overdose? It just seems impossible, right? But Shannon's story, that's the key to understanding how this whole national crisis really takes root. So, how on earth did this happen? And that's the scary part. Shannon's story lays out this pathway that has become disturbingly common, and it doesn't start where you might think, not in some dark alley. It starts in a doctor's office with a totally legitimate prescription. It all started with something that happens every day, right? A knee injury during a high school soccer game. Totally normal. The doctor prescribes an opioid for the pain, and Shannon thought, hey, a doctor gave it to me, it must be safe. So she started taking more. Then the prescriptions ran out. She had to turn to street dealers. And when the pills got too expensive, that's when she made that final devastating jump to heroin. Shannon's story is absolutely heartbreaking. But the thing is, it wasn't an isolated incident, not by a long shot. Investigators started realizing that stories just like hers were playing out all over the country. They started connecting the dots, and what they found was a full-blown systemic crisis. And it was no accident. And here's what they found at the core of the problem. Pharmaceutical companies were pushing these drugs hard. They were going to doctors and, really downplaying the addiction risks while talking up the benefits. And what happened? Prescriptions shot through the roof. Okay, so what does quadrupling even look like in real numbers? Well, get this. In 2012 alone, doctors wrote 255 million prescriptions for opioids. That's almost enough for every single adult in the entire United States to have their own bottle of pills. Just think about that. So let's be really clear here. This wasn't just about managing pain anymore. This was about market saturation. I mean, the sheer volume of pills flooding the country was enough to basically create an epidemic from the ground up. It was turning ordinary patients into addicts. And it wasn't just doctors, writing more prescriptions. You have to look at the supply side. Between 1993 and 2015, the DEA, the very agency that's supposed to control this stuff, let manufacturers just ramp up production. We're talking about increases of up to 39 times more pills. It's unbelievable. So what happens when you have this perfect storm of aggressive marketing and massive supply? You get this number, 76 billion. That's how many opioid pills were shipped into the US in just 6 years. That's over 230 pills for every man, woman, and child in the country. Okay, 76 billion pills, they don't just materialize out of nowhere, right? So who are the architects of this whole mess? Who was really pulling the strings and, let's be honest, getting rich from it? Well, when investigators started digging, they found this incredible concentration of power. It turns out just 3 companies, Landau Pharma, Fetter & Fetter, and Dean Pharma, all controlled by just 3 families, they were responsible for making a whopping 88% of all opioids in the entire world. Yeah, and this quote from one of the investigators really nails the legal argument that started to form. The idea that these companies weren't just being careless, they were knowingly pushing these highly addictive drugs for profit, operating less like healthcare providers and more like, well, corporate drug cartels. And the human cost of all that profit is just staggering. Since 1996, we're talking about over 200,000 Americans dead from opioid overdoses. To put that in perspective, that's like the entire population of a city like Salt Lake City or Knoxville, just gone. So you've got the problem defined, you've identified the key players. What's next? How do you actually hold them accountable? This is where the lawyers had to get really creative and find a whole new legal strategy. See, at first, the lawsuits from individuals and families, they just weren't working. The claims were too small to go up against these massive corporations, and trying to do a big class action suit was super complex because everyone's addiction story is so different. And that led prosecutors to this really powerful and kind of unexpected legal tool, the RICO Act. And if that sounds familiar, it should. This is the exact same law that was created back in the 70s to take down the mob. So the new game plan was brilliant. Instead of individuals, entire states started to sue, and that allowed them to build a much, much bigger case. They could claim everything from public nuisance to false advertising, but the real knockout punch? The RICO violation. They were arguing that these companies weren't just making a mistake, they were operating as a coordinated criminal enterprise. Now, these legal battles are far from over. They're still being fought in courtrooms right now. But they leave all of us with this huge question that goes way beyond any legal ruling. When a product that's perfectly legal, a product that makes billions in profits, causes this much devastation, what does true accountability even look like? It's something we really have to think about.